We're just past the climatological peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, so the tropics can get crowded this time of year. In fact, for about 6 hours last Friday, there were 3 named storms in the Atlantic at the same time: Ian, Julia, and Carl. 3 named storms in the Atlantic at once isn't all that common, but it's not rare either. It last happened 5 years ago in 2011. But 4 at once, well, that's only happened a few times in the satellite era, which goes back to the early 1960s. It didn't even happen during the hyperactive 2005 record-setting tropical season that featured 27 named storms. The last time there were 4 named storms in the Atlantic at the same time was a dozen years ago, just about this time. It was September 23rd, 2004. At that time, the leftover circulation of once Hurricane Ivan was in the Gulf of Mexico as a tropical storm. Hurricane Jeanne was east of the Bahamas. Hurricane Carl was in the middle of the ocean, and Tropical Storm Lisa was way out in the eastern Atlantic. Here's what all that looked like on satellite imagery at that time, about a dozen years ago. Prior to that, you have to go back to 1998 to find 4 named storms at once in the Atlantic. And because the lists of names are rotated every 6 years, the same list was being used that year as in 2004. For more than a day and a half in September of '98, George, Carl, Jeanne, and Ivan were all hurricanes. That makes this satellite image truly extraordinary, because this is the only time in the satellite era with 4 hurricanes in the Atlantic at once. There's Jeanne, there's Carl, there's George, and there is Ivan. There's only one other time on record when it's believed to have happened, and that was way back in 1893. There's one other tropical-related rarity that I'd like to mention because it happened exactly 20 years ago this month, but not in a place you'd expect. In mid-September 1996, a weak low-pressure system moved east across the northern lakes. It stalled over Lake Huron, and over the next 2 days intensified, but not in a way that's typical for mid-latitude lows. Instead, this storm deepened partly from heat, transferred from the lake water, which was near its climatological peak warmth. That helped concentrate warmth near the center of the storm. Formerly, we would say it had a warm core, with some intense upward motions centered around that core. What's odd is that this is how tropical cyclones develop and strengthen. In fact, the storm eventually developed an eye and spiral bands with rain and gusty winds. From a satellite perspective, it certainly looked tropical, and it was later nicknamed Hurricane Huron. It's believed to be the only time that such an unusual storm has ever been observed over the Great Lakes. Let me finish up by giving credit where it's due. The meteorologist who did the initial research on Hurricane Huron was none other than Todd Miner, who used to appear regularly on Weather World. Stay tuned. The extended forecast is next.